Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to Below the 38, episode 55, the weekend that was. I'm Andrew, that's Luke, now wearing an Incheon jersey this week. And a very warm welcome to want-away striker Mike, who grudgingly rejoins us on the podcast. How was your long vacation?
It was good. Obviously, no one's come in for me, so I'm just going to have to ride it out until I'm a free agent.
The seat was too hot for anybody to take off you. We couldn't even keep it warm for you. You've been back to K-League football since your trip away. Just one game and then a trip down south, isn't that right?
I have indeed. If you've been following my social medias, I took in the Under-18 Cup tournament, and also, of course, back to normality and seeing Ansan lose at home.
An under-18 tournament, that's very Andy Brook footballogy-esque type of a check-in.
I only checked the stadium with one of the games. I could have easily put about 7 games in, but I haven't.
Okay, you're not full Andy Brook yet. Anyway, look, on today's show, FC Seoul were on the cusp of the championship after an historic demolition of Anyang. Incheon United needed only one shot on target to beat the hapless Gwangju. In K-League 2, the Suwon Bluewings continued the tradition of over-celebrating mediocre 1-0 wins against the league's also-rans, but maybe it was justified this time because of the chasing pack. Only Suwon FC didn't drop any points. That's what we have coming up for you today.
Yeah, and remember, you can check out belowthe38thcareer.com for all of our latest articles. There's one gone up today about that 7-0 demolition. Otherwise, at Below the 38th on Twitter, Instagram and YouTube for all of our social media stuff. Please like, share and subscribe.
Indeed. Well, let's get straight into it, lads. Round 23 of the K-League 1 season took place at the weekend. 4 games on Saturday, 4 games on Sunday. Just worth noting very, very quickly that 7 of the K-League 1 teams did not score at the weekend, and 1 K-League 1 team scored 7. And unless you've been living under a rock for the last 72 hours, you probably know at this point that was FC Seoul. They've beaten Anyang 7-0. One for the history books. According to Gemini, there was a 1 in a 500,000 chance of being at a game in the top division anywhere in the world where the home team loses 7-0. Apparently it only happens about 40 times globally in professional football, which is quite extraordinary. Going to do the lotto now on Wednesday, see how that one works out. The match was over after 12 minutes. Seoul scored after 6 minutes. They scored again after 12. Like, at no point did this feel like a competitive derby. It was done and dusted after 12 minutes. It was 5-0 by half time. Should have been a lot more. Seoul finished scoring their 7th in the 58th minute. 6 different goal scorers, which is pretty impressive as well. Including Moon Son-min, who nearly caused a riot with his signature celebration in front of the home fans. For Anyang, just 1 shot on target across those 90 minutes. They've now lost 4 in a row. Seoul on the verge of the championship. Anyang on the cusp of humiliation. So that's Anyang 0, FC Seoul 7.
I can't believe he still does that dance. It must be 10 years now, pretty much, that he's been doing it. He was doing it in Incheon. Anyway, Jeonbuk played Ulsan in the Hyundai Derby, and there was a crowd of 18,800 here for this game. Brilliant attendance, but not necessarily a brilliant game. Ulsan had a lot of possession, and they just couldn't make it count. They didn't have a single shot on target in the entire game. Jeonbuk were able to create more opportunities with less than the ball, and they scored a header through Bruno Motta. He put them 1-0 up, and that's how it stayed. As a result of that win, Jeonbuk now go level on points with Ulsan, but at the same time, Ulsan's defeat means that Seoul have a 13-point lead at the top. Yeah, interesting result. Probably a fair result on reflection. Ulsan just toothless despite being the Tigers. So the race for second is on.
The race for second is on, and as ever, whilst the team at the top of the table keeps winning, everybody else keeps beating each other beneath them. You did not mention a tantrum that took place at one point in that game. Maybe we can discuss that on a later podcast. We have a little bit more time. I'm sure most of the viewers and listeners will know who I'm talking about there. Also on Saturday, Bucheon, in a slightly rearranged fixture, they destroyed Pohang 3-0. This match was rearranged because of the safety checks at the Pohang Steelyard, which you would have heard Claire Evans talk about on our podcast last week. Bucheon, rather ridiculously, are unbeaten in their 6 matches so far this season against Jeonbuk Hyundai Motors and Pohang Steelers, 4 wins and 2 draws against 2 giants of Korean football, with safety already guaranteed a long time ago now because of Gwangju's incompetence. This has been a remarkably good season in K-League 1, Bucheon's first ever season at the top flight. Gallego kind of proves his early season form is not a one-off. He wasn't really a standout player for Jeju and Gangwon in the past. I was surprised that Bucheon actually made a move for him. Maybe it was just that experience in Korea which swayed their decision, but he's now scored 8 goals and assisted 4, including another goal at the weekend. He also made the Team K-League lineup for the match against Manchester City last month. Pohang are now really beginning to struggle to make the top 6. That's 4 losses in 5 matches, and they're only a few points above Bucheon.
Yeah, and so from 3 goals to no goals, Jeju 0, Gimcheon 0. We mentioned how Gimcheon are the draw specialists of K-League 1, the Cheongju, if you will. Now, they drew 0-0, and despite that, they move an extra point ahead of Gwangju because Gwangju lost. So both teams created decent chances, and it was just a bit of a lack of quality in the final third. Perhaps both teams are a bit tired giving all the games that we've played in July, all of the extra midweek fixtures, and given how hot the weather still is. So ultimately defences were on top, and Baek Jong-bom in the Gimcheon goal made a spate of decent saves to make sure that it stayed 0-0. Yeah, Gimcheon, we've said all over, they're going down, but they're still plodding along. They're picking up points where other teams haven't. Jeju have been on a good run. They're still in 5th, but they couldn't take advantage of playing Gimcheon at home. 0-0.
Yeah, you wonder if the midweek travel to the mainland for the FA Cup match may have had an impact on Jeju there. On to Sunday then, Gangwon FC's very, very slim, if indeed even had any title aspirations, are now over. They were well beaten 3-0 at Daejeon. Daejeon had recorded 20 points for the first 20 matches. They've now got 9 from the last 4. So given what they've been doing all season, this is considered red hot form. They remain 10th, but top 6 is absolutely in their sights. It's interesting as well that their 3 goal scorers, Ludwigsen, Joo Min-gyu and Jong Jae-hee, they're the type of players who were signed the last couple of years to bring Daejeon to another level, which they did last season. Daejeon did finish 2nd, but it hasn't been enough for them to make that extra step towards K-League 1 Championship. They're still in the bottom half of the table, but they're now very much in the contention for a final A spot. Gangwon, unfortunately, it's been a great season for them, but a little bit like Pohang and Anyang we've talked about before. There's some teams that just seem to be running out of steam as the summer comes to a close, and Gangwon are one of those. Daejeon 3, Gangwon 0.
And Gwangju versus Incheon is our last game on Sunday, contrasting the 18,800 in attendance at the Hyundai Derby just up the road. There were only 1,975 people in Gwangju World Cup Stadium for this game. It was a game that lacked quality. There were very few chances. In fact, Incheon only had 1 shot on target, and that was in the 91st minute. It was a Mugosa penalty. Now, thinking back to the previous meeting between these two clubs at Gwangju World Cup Stadium, Mugosa missed a last-minute penalty to give Gwangju a 3-2 victory. It remains their only win of the season. But yesterday, he didn't make any mistake. He scored the goal, gave Incheon the win, and 3 points for Incheon. Another defeat for Gwangju.
Another defeat. They haven't won since they beat Incheon in the second round of the season. The good news for you now is that we won't be able to mention that again, I think, unless Incheon finish in Final B, and then Gwangju will have one more crack at Incheon in Sungwi Arena later on this year. To the table, not a lot to say, I'm afraid, anymore. FC Seoul are 13 points clear. Even though it's August, it's surely over. Not only that, but they've scored 46 goals. And Ulsan are next with 37. So that 13-point gap is essentially 14. And when you look at the sides below them, so Seoul have won 2 in a row, including that 7-0 spanking at the weekend. Ulsan have lost 2 in a row. Jeonbuk have lost 2 out of the last 3. And Gangwon have lost 3 out of the last 4. The sides that are supposed to be chasing Seoul down are basically losing regularly. At the other end of the table, Gwangju are 15 points adrift of Gimcheon. Gimcheon in 11th are actually closer to Ulsan in 2nd than they are to they are to Gwangju, 1 spot below them. I always like seeing things like this as well, and it highlights that I find the ridiculous classification of goals scored. Anyang and Bucheon now have completely identical records: 24 matches, 7 wins, 9 draws, 8 losses each. Anyang have scored 30 goals to Bucheon's 27, so they're ahead of Bucheon in the standings, even though they've recorded a win against each other so far. Anyang's goal difference is -7. Bucheon's is 0, but for some reason Anyang are ahead of Bucheon in the standings. I think they need to fix that. It should be goal difference ahead of goals scored. And that is K-League 1 done. Now, there is a full midweek fixture list. We don't have enough time to give a proper preview to that. We will have a quick look at the fixtures at the end of this podcast. Of course, by the time you're listening to this, those matches might have already taken place. But let's go on to K-League 2, where the mighty have now taken a big lead at the top of the table. And back to discuss all that is Mike. Tell us all about the Bluewings there, Mike.
Well, no, I'm now going to put a little pause in there just to ruin your little moment. For the fans, of course. I did enjoy a statistic actually about the chance of seeing a 7-0 home defeat. Actually, I did watch a little bit of MLB while I was on my travels, and I saw a 0-11 and a 0-8, which when I looked it up, there's a 1 in 22,000 chance of that actually occurring. So I think I managed to find an even crazier unlucky statistic than that. But yes, K2. So I think there's always been a sense this season that if the Bluewings did get on top, they might just end up staying there, and that looks like it's happening. There's only 6 points between the first through 5th place, actually. The difference is the Bluewings have basically been like asset stripping their opponents, and it's sort of working because, of course, the Bluewings won this weekend, 1-0 at Cheonan.
That's right.
And it was Mina who scored his 11th of the season, but he's already reached double figures with 8th place at Gimpo. So I think the very motto of this season for the Bluewings is, if you can't beat them, buy them. But of course, it's working because they're at the top of the table. Elan, they missed a massive chance. They were held at home to the Frontiersmen Pardew 1-1, which means they say second, 3 points behind the Bluewings. That could have easily been just a point, but they messed that up royally. 4th and 5th were actually in action, Daegu and Busan. They played out a 1-1 draw on Saturday evening. That's going to be gutting for Daegu because Busan have just absolutely collapsed. They're both Daegu 5 points and Busan 6 points off the Bluewings. Bluewings aren't actually particularly clear yet. There's still that sense that they might just buy a few other players just to weaken these sides a little bit more.
The transfer window is closed. The transfer window has closed now. The transfer window is closed. There'll be no more purchasing. There'll be no more purchasing.
I'm sure a contract may mysteriously end up being terminated early and then players moving on free agents. Not like it hasn't happened before. But anyway, for Busan, probably a promising performance. Sorry for the off-field intervention there. It's a Bluewings thing. So anyway, that leaves Suwon FC, who actually have a game in hand over the more corporate other city team members. Couldn't quite work that into a phrase. I apologise, but they dispatched Gimhae 2-0, taking their goal tally to a league high 32. They're 4 points behind the league leaders, but they do have that game in hand. Now what's interesting is none of the top 3 have actually lost in the last 5, so I think it looks very much like a shootout for the automatics between those 3, and I'm going to probably call it here and say it's probably going to be Eland and Suwon FC fighting for that 2nd place automatic spot. I know Luke is really excited to add Mokdong to his calendar next year, so I know which team he'll be rooting for. Now there is that other final promotion playoff spot. I know nobody really cares, but Hwasong are there in 6th. They have been dropping points, and they had another surprise defeat at the Dragon's Den, as it seems to be now branded. However, they still sit a healthy 5 points ahead of Asan in 7th, who did actually get back to winning ways against Yongin. Elsewhere, Cheongju played Gyeongnam. There were 2 goals. If you know how the K-League 2 works, you should be able to work out the result of that information. A simple bit of deductive reasoning needed. And I did have the pleasure of Ansan giving up a lead, as I said earlier, 2-1 to the Magpies late on. It was in fact a good game, and that's probably why Ansan and Songnam is clearly a bigger fixture with a higher attendance than Gwangju Incheon. So, to summarise, yes, I've come back and just seen that the Bluewings, they're top. They're not doing it in any sort of style as they're tumbling and stumbling their way back to the K-League 1, 50,001 notes fluttering in their wake. But to be honest, the Bluewings fans really care after 3 years down here in the K-League 2. I'm sure they're not particularly bothered if they are back in the K-League 1 next season.
It's funny because they probably will care if they go back up and the football is just dour again, and then they'll wonder why they have to be subjected to this for another season. Like you were saying, one of the reasons they have not pulled clear is because that 32 goals scored is quite low compared to the sides who are chasing them. So Suwon FC win their game in hand, they'll only be a point behind them. Gimpo sat out the weekend and their next match is against the Bluewings, and unfortunately their promotional poster for that game has Luis Mina in it in his Gimpo jersey. They've had to since change that because he's swapped the bright lights of Salta for Big Bird. There's not a huge amount to talk about in K-League 2. It's sort of trundling along as it has been for the last number of weeks. I do feel that it's a little bit sad for Hwasong, but it does seem like certainly their championship race is now over. And they have a battle now even just to finish inside the top 6, and I'd say the same applies to Busan too. It looks like it's, for automatic promotion, it's 2 from 4. You'd imagine Suwon, Seoul, Eland, and Daegu, and I can't think of anything else that we would need to talk about in K-League 1, K-League 2 for now. It is interesting though that when sides at the top play against each other, nobody seems to be able to win. There's always a draw, like we saw Suwon and Seoul before, and then Daegu and Busan last weekend. They're not taking advantage, especially the home teams, against the sides who are coming to their stadium. So that's K-League 2 done and dusted for another week. I haven't actually checked the figures. I know the Bluewings are playing Gimpo. I don't know who the other sides are playing. I will obviously feature this in the preview coming up. And then there's all those sort of also ran teams like Chanan and Ansan and those type of teams. They have to fulfill their fixtures as well, so we might give a couple of minutes to them in the preview show. Let's have a quick look at the K-League 1 fixtures this week. There are 3 on Tuesday, 3 on Wednesday. The Tuesday night fixtures are Jeju against Pohang Steelers. Pohang are not happy to be having to make that trip. Gimcheon Sangmu versus Jeonbuk. Speaking of teams that are only making a trip, that's probably Jeonbuk. Their manager returns to the side where he basically made his name as a manager. And FC Seoul host Bucheon. It's about 8 kilometers, I think, separating those two sides. A nice opportunity for Bucheon to lay down another marker in what's been an impressive first season in K-League 1. On Wednesday, Anyang look to get back to non-7-0 thrashing the ways against Incheon. It's Gangwon against Gwangju. Daejeon Hana Citizen against Ulsan. Anything stand out for you there, Luke, as the K-League 1 expert?
Hardly an expert. I reckon Daejeon Ulsan's probably going to be the pick of the games. There's probably going to be 1 or 2 0-0 draws. Seoul will win comfortably. Gangwon should win comfortably. But I think Daejeon versus Ulsan, it could go either way. Both teams need a win. I think it's been a poor season for Daejeon generally, but they beat Ulsan earlier. I think it was 4-1, and they drew 2-2 in the return game. So, yeah, Ulsan need points to hold on to second place. Daejeon really need to start winning more and get a climb on for Final A. So, yeah, that would be the one to watch, I think. Anyang versus Incheon, probably going to be a draw as well.
You don't think they'll win 7-0?
And the worst time to play a team is after they've been hammered 7-0, isn't it?
Maybe.
Normally, you would think, because they're going to come out fired up. I mean, unless it's Gwangju who are losing by that many, then you've got a chance. But I think Anyang are going to be up for it. I think they could get a win against Incheon.
That's the game that Mike and I are going to Wednesday night, 7:30 kickoff. Anyang versus Incheon media section. So we'll hopefully have some reaction for you from the mix zone from both the Incheon end and the Anyang end. Can you imagine if we'd actually booked ourselves in for Anyang versus Anyang versus Seoul, and the game meant 7-0? Of asking the media officer, can we talk to one of your players after that? That's.
Do you think would anybody turn up? Would any of the Anyang players turn up?
I saw interviews with two of them.
Because I know
Young Won definitely did an interview after the game, and in a football sense, it looked like he'd seen death. So I don't know what you could possibly ask him. I mean, it's the worst. He's a really experienced defender, Korean international. He's played in other countries in Asia. How many times has he ever experienced something like this? What could you possibly ask somebody like? How bad was that? Other than, I think the only questions you could really ask, like you were saying, bounce back. How do you bounce back? What's training going to be like on Monday? I just can't think of any other questions you can ask them. But anyway, that's where we'll be on Wednesday. Anyang versus Incheon. I love these midweek games, and there's another set of them coming up in early September because they're obviously playing catch up after missing about 7 weeks or so because of the World Cup. Are you looking forward to your trip to Anyang on Wednesday, Mike?
I mean, I imagine the atmosphere will be good, just as it will be with Seoul Bucheon. I do wonder, actually, I was at the earlier game in the season when Bucheon went to Seoul, and again, the atmosphere was absolutely cracking. But FC Seoul kind of schooled Bucheon, and I do wonder if they might be trying to repeat that against one of their near rivals again on Wednesday. But I don't know, Luke's kind of cursed the game now with that draw written all over it, so I'm fully expecting a 0-0
just
on
not
Wednesday at Anyang.
Yeah, I mean, teams don't seem to be, like as we said, 7 of the teams didn't even score at the weekend. Like that's the worry. I could sit through another 7-0. I just don't want to see another 0-0. I've only seen one this season, and one's more than enough.
The thing is, as well, they do goals scored rather than goal difference because they want to make it an attacking league. But how many 0-0 draws are there? How many draws are there in the league in comparison to wins and defeats? I'd love to know, like, compared to other divisions, other leagues, like, does K-League have more or fewer draws than comparative leagues? It would be interesting. Who wants to research that? One of you two. Go. We'll do it on the next show.
Kim-Sean Sang-moo's 14 draws in 24 matches means that you're probably going to get the information that you're looking for from Gemini or ChatGPT. Actually, just looking at this, Incheon and Anyang have scored the same number of goals this season, 30 and 30, and they are separated by 3 points in the table. So a win will actually put Anyang back above Incheon, even though Incheon's goal difference is currently 12 better than Anyang.
We'll just look at the goal scored for the K2 league leaders, and it'll again point to this perhaps is not having the impact on the game that they really want.
Yeah.
Well,
that's just a slide in.
We'll see.
We don't have to worry about that one. Anyway, let's wrap this show up for this week, and we can talk about the Bluewings again on the preview show. Mike will have plenty more to say, hopefully then. That's it from us. Check out Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, Bloated38, website, bloated38korea.com. Is that a Suka Batik? Can I say that again?
Luke as well. One for Luke for Wednesday.
Were you storing those?
I've just, it's an ornament.
Okay. It's a pity it's gone. Like, share, subscribe. See you for the midweek show, probably on Wednesday, maybe Thursday after this week's action. And we'll talk to you then. Thanks for watching. Goodbye, everybody.